the thing that got me out was they sent me on a short-term preaching trip to Utah, to Mormonville, USA.
Mhm.
And yeah, we got there and were given a briefing on Mormonism. And, you know, they say, you know, the Mormon church treats women terribly. They just see them as, you know, producers of children, and that's it, and just helpers to their husband, and that's it. And you know, they don't get to choose their husbands, and just, you know, all these things that were paralleling my story. And I was like, wait a minute, am I in a cult? But it was terrifying. And then during that trip, I started noticing things that I didn't really notice before. When it comes to coercion, just the ways that we were taught to preach in a manipulative way.
Mhm.
Like very specifically, these are my notes that I took from that briefing. Yeah, this is July of 2022. We were told that the Mormons, if they were very active in the Mormon church, that they would just be a time-wasting demon.
Mhm.
Because, and now looking at that, I get why they said it, because they were doing what we were also doing. There's not a single thing that they didn't have an answer to, and us as well, because we're both cults.
Yes.
And, you know, if we try to just continuously use each other's tactics against each other all day, we're going to get nowhere. And so that's why they say, oh, it's a time-wasting demon. So they told us, like, okay, when you're out there preaching and you run into members of the Mormon church, ask them questions to try to figure out how active they are, or if they've left, you know, which is code for, like, is this person in a vulnerable position or not? And can we get them?
Mhm.
So, you know, that's one thing I noticed. And then we had so here in this region of the WMSCOG, Utah, the Salt Lake location, they're known for their, like, all the publicity that they've gotten, like going on the news and all their community service that they do. And before I went, the overseer here in Colorado Springs said, oh, hey, like, you know, talk with them, ask them, you know, how they got their awards that they have, how they get so many community service events that they do. Yeah, so I went there and they actually gave us a training on all of it. And that was very interesting. And that's where they just outwardly said, because they had the President's Award for community service, but in the church name for that specific location in Utah. And they specifically said, like, oh yeah, like, you don't actually have to do the work to get that. Like, it's not real from the president. Like, they literally just said, we just applied for it and we got it. That's it. And then, you know, they also said, like, within their community that they just would search for awards that were available within the community and just apply for them. And they were like, and sometimes there's, like, not really a lot of applicants, so we just will get random awards. And then they have this huge wall with all these random awards. And so when people come, they're like, oh, look at our church. And then they can, and then Utah's interesting too, because, you know, it has a very deep history of Mormonism, especially when it comes to, like, leadership in the community, politics. And so, like, it can be hard for another religion to have validity in the community. So they think that having all those awards helps them in that specific setting too. So that just was so, like, come on, guys. They even said, and this one I was like, oh my gosh, they said that they're like, yeah, you can even just, like, mock up an award, You know, like create one of your own and present it to them and see if they'll sign it. So that was my first encounter with realizing that most all of the awards that the church has are fake and they did not actually earn them. So that was eye-opening to me. And yeah, mostly, you know, one thing that was interesting too is they said that, you know, the Mormons knew about Heavenly Mother and her existence in heaven. And
yeah, they've been talking about that longer than. Yeah, actually, there's they actually put out something recently. I think Jordan, you may have seen it. From the Mormon
I did,
Church.
yeah.
Yeah, you submitted it.
Steve sent that to me. That was actually I never knew that was a part of Mormon doctrine, but that, they have a doctrine of a mother God, that we have a mother in heaven who we're going to go and be with, which to me, that when I found that out, I think it was just last week, that was kind of a moment of, well, that's, you know, this seems like a pretty significant problem for the WMS, because they've had it longer than the WMS.
Much
They're
longer.
the ones who, So if this is true, Ahnsahnghong, he's not the one who revealed Mother.
He never really was. It was
right. He wasn't. Anyways.
And then Ducal Kim kind of copied her notes, but
yeah. So, but yeah, that in that moment though, before I started doing my research, it just was interesting to me because it was like, wait, I thought we were the only church that had the truth of Mother. So, you know, it kind of had my gears turning. And so I came back from that trip in Utah. When I got back that following Sabbath, they had promoted the guy they had arranged me to, you know, knowing everything that they did, they promoted him. And then the next day I found out about a death in the family out of state. And so that was my out. I was like, all right, I got to go figure this out. So I drove out of state, went to my family function, and I started researching. First, just the Mormon Church. I wanted to know more. I was curious. I started listening to ex-Mormon stories, and then, you know, stories from other, you know, high control religious cults. And I was seeing that there wasn't anything different from my experience to theirs. It was all the same. The way they were brought in, the way they were manipulated, the way they were ostracized, the way how deeply they believed, how good of people they were, and that there wasn't anything wrong with them, that it wasn't their fault, but it was just the group that they were in that inflicted this abuse and control. And so, yeah, then, you know, read Steve Hassan's book. Then we advanced to Great Light Studios. And, the rest was history. But, you know, then I started learning, I remember, you know, when you read Steve Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control, and he shares his story, I was like, wait a minute, was this guy in the same church? You know, South Korea.
Yeah.
And all the things he was saying, I was like, wait, no, we say that. I was like angry. I was like, why is this guy stealing? Why is this church stealing our stuff? Come to find out, they were doing that before the WMSCOG. Nothing that the World Mission Society Church of God teaches is original to them. They've just made it up. They've pulled it from other cults and put it together. And honestly, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I call it the Frankenstein.
Yeah.
They take bits and pieces of all these and they create a monster.
Yeah. And of course, like, what I do want to say is, like, in those moments of my research, I didn't want any of it to not be true. I wanted the church to be right because I believed it so deeply, so deeply. And it's so hard. It's so hard to admit that everything you believe in is fake. It's so hard to admit that you were abused, that you were lied to. It's so hard. Like, just an indescribable feeling, you know. But, you know, in continuing to research, I realized, like, all right, I need to face these things. This happened. And now I'm going to learn what they did to me. I'm going to try my best to psychologically undo it. Very, very difficult. And that's when I realized, like, it's not just manipulation. It's very deep brainwashing. And they completely had us in a state where we were living outside of our body. You know, we weren't allowed to feel emotion. We weren't allowed to have our own thoughts. And later when I learned that that is a cult tactic used for brainwashing to strip you of yourself, it just, gosh, you feel so lost. And coming out and doing that work of trying to figure all that out, it's so hard. But I feel like it's, you know, if someone has, you know, just recently left the church or is thinking about leaving, and you're having these feelings of extreme fear and not like trusting yourself, and you're thinking that your thoughts are coming from Satan, just know that those are cult tactics of brainwashing and manipulation. It's not you, you know? You know, the deep fear that's put in you, it was all intentional. You know, it's not, God, I wish I would have known that. You know, I never would have went.
It's not unique to this church alone.
Yeah, it's not.
Every cult member who leaves feels exactly that sort of way.
Yeah.
Where like they don't trust their own thoughts anymore. When they're leaving and they realize all these things are bad, it's not like an influence from Satan. It's not your demonic, you know, spirits. It's not the fact that you sinned in heaven. That's why you feel this way. No, it's every single cult group. You leave it, you feel the exact same feelings that you are feeling when you leave the World Mission Society.